Hi, welcome to Actors Corner, Season 2, Episode 3. Today we'll be seeing Connie Cifelli perform a monologue from Dog Sees God.
I was pregnant. Don't worry, it wasn't yours. I had just gotten an abortion the day before, and the next day in biology we were ironically learning about reproduction. I'm listening to Miss Rainey talking about eggs, fallopian tubes, the uterus, and I'm feeling sick to my stomach already, trying to zone out on anything I can. So I start reading a note over Miss Puritanical Princess's shoulder, and she's telling her friends how happy she is that she's a virgin and that she's gonna stay that way until she gets married, and how repulsed she is by all of the whores at our school. Without thinking, I reached into my pocket for my cute little red Bic lighter and lit her cute little red hair on fire. And every day in therapy, they ask me if I'm sorry yet, and I just can't be. No matter how hard I try, bitches like that make me sick. They've made me sick. I'm officially sick, psychotic, unrepentant, and unremorseful. I've been branded a sociopath, and I have no choice but to believe it.
Thank you so much for doing that monologue for us, Connie. For those that don't know, that was a monologue from Dog Sees God by Burt Royal. So Connie, can you talk a little bit more about what this play is about?
Yeah, so it's kind of a reinvention of the Charlie Brown films and movies. It's a play kind of if they all went bad. Each character has their own problems that they're going through. The monologue that I did followed Van's sister when she got locked up in an insane asylum, and so she's kind of having a conversation saying why she got in there, but the whole thing is you never know if she's telling the truth or if she's lying about it.
That's really interesting. So it's kind of like an unreliable narrator kind of thing.
Yeah,
I love that. And that was a great monologue you performed for us, so thank you for that. And what do you think this monologue is saying?
So in it, I am talking about why I essentially lit this girl in my class's hair on fire. And the excuse that I give is that I was pregnant. It turns out that I was not, and I made the whole thing up just to kind of guilt trip this guy that I'm talking to. But I do think that, in other words, it's kind of just making excuses for what you've done. You know, she's facing the consequences. She's obviously locked up for her actions, and she's the type of person who doesn't want to take responsibility, so she's constantly just coming up with elaborate stories explaining why she did what she did when she just doesn't really want to admit that she's troubled.
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting character. Would you see this character as more of like a villain type character or like kind of like an anti-hero?
I would say an anti-hero. I definitely would not say villain. I think that she's a very complex character. I think that she's a modern character. A lot of women today, when they're written in film or plays, they do have a lot of layers. It's never like black and white. There's a lot of gray area. And I think especially in this play, when you see a bunch of like good characters that you grew up with go bad, it's really hard to just paint one as a villain compared to like what you're used to.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting. So like the comics as a child are so like cut and dry, and then you see this play later in life and you're like, oh, these characters are all going through a lot more than we originally thought they were. So moving on a little bit, can you describe what influenced you to pursue acting?
Yeah, so I started acting when I was in middle school. I was doing the plays there. But growing up, I always just would spend all my time watching television, which definitely was not like the healthiest thing. I probably should have been playing outside, but I just used to watch a bunch of TV shows and like wish that I was in them. And I feel like a lot of people kind of think that when they're children, like, oh, like I want to be on TV, but the thought never really escaped me, and I would always tell my parents I want to take an acting class, like I want to go sing on stage in church, like I always wanted to be in front of an audience. And I think the first time that I knew I wanted to make it a job was when I was finally on stage performing for like plays and stuff. But I think I knew from a young age that I like definitely just wanted to see myself like in the arts doing something with acting. I just wanted to play a bunch of characters that weren't myself.
Mm-hmm. I love that. I think a lot of people in high school, they kind of have a rough idea of what they want to do, but they don't really have the chance to do it yet. You know, like you don't become an engineer in high school and say, that's what I want to go into. But I think theater and film is really interesting because you do have that chance to do community theater or do a student film or something and be able to say, this is what I want to do because I've had experience doing it. So I think that's amazing. And what do you feel like is more important for an actor, talent or training?
I think both, and I think a third one would be passion. I think that you need to have the passion to get training. You can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't know how to put it to use, I don't think it's going to be as useful. There's still a lot of techniques that I don't know. I need to get better at Shakespeare. I need to get better at acting for the camera. There's a whole bunch of things that training can really help with, and even if you have a natural talent and charisma for it, I think that that can only improve and get better with help and extra work.
Yeah, I totally agree. Training, I think, is always important, even if you are kind of launched into an awesome role and you kind of feel like you have a lot of natural talent or you're born into the theater or something. Constantly training and learning and growing is super important as an actor. And can you describe your most challenging role to date?
I think my most challenging role to date would be a recent role that I had in Cymbeline. I was playing a male character for the first time, and I was in full male attire. I had a wig, I had a mustache, I had a beard. I had to learn how to walk like a man, how to talk like a man, and I had never done a character like that before. And, you know, it was a challenge, and I did have to train for it. You know, I worked with our professor and our director on how to lower my voice, how to do male cadences when I was walking, and it was hard. You know, I had to train my voice to be able to handle the stamina of shouting in such like a low pitch constantly. But I think it was a good challenge. Would I do it again? Maybe not, but you know, until I put myself in that position, I never would have known like how to do that.
Absolutely. Yeah, every time I ask this question to someone who was in Cymbeline, they're like, yes, that role was really hard. Last episode, I had Joanna Starpoulos on, and she talked about her role as Bassanio in Cymbeline. And I think my hardest role to date was probably being the queen in Cymbeline. Yeah. That was just a very difficult show all around. Outdoor theater, I think, is a whole nother animal to tackle, so there's definitely and Shakespeare. And, like, I had never done a Shakespeare play. Same. I don't know you. Yeah. So super difficult in general. And moving on, what's your favorite thing about acting?
My favorite thing about acting is getting to play someone who is the complete opposite of me. I consider myself, you know, kind of a mix of an extrovert and an introvert, but when I'm acting, you know, I can just become someone who's completely out there. I could become someone who's super emotional, someone who's super reserved. I think that sort of the endless possibilities of who you could become is something that's really interesting to me. Something I love watching are like documentaries or biopics where, you know, you see these actors completely transform into other people, like with hair and makeup and accents, and I think that's something that has always interested me about just becoming someone completely different than yourself.
I love that. That's something I love about acting as well, especially when the actor looks so much like the person that they're playing. In a biopic, I think that's amazing. And moving on, what motivates you in this field? Because it's a really difficult field. We're often underpaid, long hours. What's something that motivates you?
Something that motivates me is honestly just the people I surround myself with. In high school, I honestly didn't get cast in a lot of parts. I didn't get a single callback in high school. And, you know, my family would always be like, well, why are you going into this in college? And sometimes I would be like, honestly, I have no idea. But I was surrounded by other people who wanted to do the same thing, other students who were doing all of these college auditions, and they were just like, if this is really what you want to do, then you have to go for it. And I got to college and I met the same like-minded people who were looking on all these websites on how to get more opportunities, how to do short films. And I think when you surround yourself by people who are equally as motivated as you are, then it just inspires you to keep going that extra mile.
I love that. Yeah, I had a similar experience in high school. I really didn't get cast that much. I was in like one play, and I had like 2 lines. I played the guard in 12 Angry Jurors, so I wasn't even a juror. So I definitely agree with that. It can be hard, and just I saw a play recently, Mr. Parent, at the Lyric Stage, and in it he says that theater feeds you, and I just think that's so true, because there's something about being in a dark theater on a sunny day and you're more than happy to be there for 8 hours. So one of the last questions that I'm going to ask you is, who is an actor that inspires you?
One of my favorite actors and one of my biggest role models in general is Sarah Michelle Gellar. She's most notable for her role on Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Watching that show when I was growing up, that was kind of the first empowered female lead I had ever seen. And so I kind of just got obsessed with her and the character, and I watched the other things that she did. She was Daphne in Scooby-Doo. And just watching her both on screen and off screen, she plays these powerful females, and then she is one in real life. Like, she is not problematic, she gives back, she's in like a healthy relationship, and she's been that way for a long time. And I think the industry can change a lot of people, and just watching someone who's kind of gone through it as a whole and has come out, you know, the same or even better on the other end is really inspiring.
I love that. That's a really interesting choice, because she's a bit of like an older generation, more like a 90s, 80s kid role model, but I love that. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. This has been Actors Corner Season 2, Episode 3.